The Galactic Council chamber trembled as Queen Zeroleth's claws scraped against the obsidian table. Her crimson scales rippled with barely contained fury, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees as her ice-blue breath misted from her nostrils. The assembled ambassadors from a dozen worlds shifted nervously in their seats, their various forms of diplomatic immunity suddenly feeling very thin indeed. The 57th Suitor has withdrawn his proposal, announced Chancellor Vex, his violet tentacles quivering as he delivered the news. His multiple eyes refused to meet the Queen's burning gaze. Prince Zarnok of the hegemony cited irreconcilable differences in temperament as his reason for departure. A low growl rumbled from Queen Zeroleth's throat, causing several smaller delegates to flee the chamber entirely. She was magnificent in her rage, standing nearly 9 feet tall with wings that could blot out a star when fully extended. Her people, the Draconis, were the most feared warriors in 3 galaxies, and she was their undisputed ruler. Yet for all her power, she remained alone. Irreconcilable differences, she repeated, her voice like grinding metal. The coward couldn't even face me to say it himself. He sent his advisor, trembling like a leaf in a solar storm. Her tail lashed, sending a decorative pillar crashing to the floor. They all start the same way. They see the military might of my empire, the wealth of my worlds, the prestige of my bloodline. But the moment they witness what I truly am, they scatter like cosmic debris. Ambassador Kelton of the Rigel Confederation cleared his throat nervously. His species was known for their diplomatic prowess, but even he seemed at a loss. Your Majesty, perhaps if you could moderate your responses during the courtship rituals? Many species find displays of raw power to be intimidating. The Queen's laugh was bitter and sharp. Moderate myself? Should I pretend to be weak? Should I hide my strength to make some pampered prince feel comfortable? Her eyes blazed brighter. I watched Prince Thane of Andromeda flee when I crushed a boulder with my bare hands during our romantic walk. Lord Quintus requested a different planet to meet on after I accidentally melted his ceremonial sword just by touching it. And don't get me started on Duke Zirian, who fainted when I roared during what he called an intimate moment. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of her claws drumming against stone. Each tap created small cracks that spiderwebbed across the surface. The Queen had been searching for a mate for over a century. Her advisors insisted it was necessary for political stability and the continuation of her bloodline. But every potential suitor from every corner of the galaxy had the same reaction to her true nature. They want a queen who sits pretty on a throne, she continued, pacing now with predatory grace. Someone who smiles and waves and lets them make the real decisions. They don't want a warrior. They don't want someone who has conquered 12 star systems before her 30th solar cycle. They want a decoration, not a partner. Chancellor Vex consulted his datapad with trembling tentacles. There is one more option, Your Majesty, though I hesitate to suggest it. Speak, she commanded, though her tone suggested she expected little. The humans have responded to our general diplomatic outreach. They've recently joined the galactic community and have requested an audience. Their representative is due to arrive tomorrow. The Queen's expression shifted to one of disdain mixed with curiosity. Humans? Those primitive creatures from the third spiral arm? What could they possibly want with the Draconis Empire? Trade agreements, technology exchange, the usual requests from developing civilizations, Vex replied. But perhaps their ignorance of your reputation might work in your favor. They may not have heard the stories. Queen Zeroleth stopped pacing and considered this. Every other species in the galaxy knew of her legendary temper, her devastating combat abilities, and her complete inability to find a mate who could handle her intensity. The humans might indeed be ignorant enough to approach without preconceived notions. Very well, she said finally, but this is a diplomatic meeting, not a courtship arrangement. I refuse to lower myself to seeking a mate among primitives. Even as she said it, something stirred in her chest. Perhaps it was hope, though she had learned long ago that hope was a dangerous emotion for one such as her. Of course, Your Majesty, Vex agreed quickly, purely diplomatic. As the chamber emptied and Queen Zeroleth retired to her private quarters, she found herself wondering what these humans might be like. Would they run screaming like all the others? Or might they surprise her? Tomorrow would bring answers, though she refused to admit that for the first time in decades, she was looking forward to meeting someone new. Marcus Chun stepped off the shuttle onto the landing platform of the Draconis Royal Palace, completely unaware that he was about to become the most interesting thing to happen to Queen Zeroleth in over a century. The human ambassador carried himself with quiet confidence, his dark hair slightly tousled from the journey, and his brown eyes taking in the alien architecture with genuine fascination rather than fear. "Impressive," he murmured to his aide, Sarah, as they gazed up at the crystalline spires that seemed to pierce the very clouds. "The engineering required to build something like this must be extraordinary." Sarah, who had done considerably more research on their host than Marcus apparently had, looked nervous. "Sir, are you sure you've read the briefing files? The Draconis are considered the most aggressive warrior species in known space. Their queen is particularly volatile." Marcus shrugged, adjusting his simple diplomatic uniform. Unlike the elaborate costumes worn by most galactic dignitaries, he preferred practical clothing that allowed for easy movement. "Every species has its cultural quirks, Sarah. We're here to learn and hopefully establish trade relations. Besides, I've always found that treating people with respect tends to work regardless of their background." The human diplomatic party was escorted through halls lined with battle trophies and weapons from 1,000 conquered worlds. Where other ambassadors had grown pale at these displays of military might, Marcus stopped frequently to examine them with genuine interest. "This sword," he said to their Draconis escort, a nervous captain named Zeth, "the metal composition is fascinating. Is it naturally occurring or forged?" Captain Zeth blinked in surprise. Most visitors either ignored the weapons or stared at them in terror. "It's forged from star metal, sir. The Queen herself crafted it during the Siege of Proxima. She's a metalworker too? That's remarkable skill on top of military leadership," Marcus replied with obvious admiration. "I'd love to learn about the techniques involved." When they reached the throne room, Queen Zeroleth was waiting in full royal regalia. Her scales gleamed like liquid fire, and her massive form dominated the space. She had decided to present her most intimidating appearance, expecting the humans to either flee immediately or stammer their way through a brief, terrified audience. Instead, Marcus stepped forward with a respectful bow and spoke in perfectly pronounced Draconis. "Your Majesty, it is an honor to stand before the legendary queen of the Draconis Empire. I am Marcus Chun, representing Earth's diplomatic corps." The queen's eyes widened slightly. Not only had he bothered to learn her language, but his pronunciation was nearly flawless. More surprising still, there was no fear in his voice or posture. He met her gaze directly, something even the bravest warriors rarely attempted. "You speak our tongue," she observed, her voice carefully controlled. "I studied it during the journey here," Marcus replied easily. "I find that communication goes much smoother when you make the effort to speak in someone's native language. Though I apologize if my accent is still rough around the edges." Queen Zeroleth found herself momentarily speechless. In her centuries of dealing with other species, no one had ever bothered to learn Draconis before meeting her. They expected her to communicate in a common galactic tongue, as if her own language was beneath their notice. "Tell me, human," she said, rising from her throne to her full, intimidating height, "what do you know of our people?" Marcus tilted his head thoughtfully. "From our research, the Draconis are master engineers, skilled warriors, and have built one of the most stable multi-world governments in the galaxy. Your people value honor, strength, and loyalty above all else. You've managed to maintain peace across dozens of diverse worlds for over 3 centuries, which is frankly impressive given the challenges of governing such a vast territory." The queen descended the steps slowly, testing his nerve. Most beings would have stepped back or shown some sign of intimidation as she approached. Marcus held his ground, his expression remaining calm and interested. "And what do you think of me personally?" she asked, stopping just a few feet away. Her height advantage was overwhelming, and the heat radiating from her scales would have been uncomfortable for most species. Marcus looked up at her without flinching. "I think you're probably one of the most accomplished rulers in galactic history. Building and maintaining an empire requires incredible intelligence, strategic thinking, and strength of character. The fact that you've done it while apparently also mastering metalworking and Engineering suggests you're the type of leader who believes in understanding everything about your domain personally. For the first time in recent memory, Queen Ziraleth felt off balance. Where was the fear? The nervous flattery? The desperate attempt to appease her legendary temper? "You're not afraid," she stated, though it came out more like a question. Marcus smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Should I be? You haven't given me any reason to fear you. You've been nothing but courteous since I arrived. I could destroy you with a single breath," she pointed out, though she wasn't sure why she was testing him. "I'm sure you could," Marcus agreed readily. "Just like I could probably hack into your computer systems or analyze your economic structure for weaknesses. We all have our talents. But since we're here for diplomatic talks, not combat or espionage, I don't see why either of us would want to do any of those things." The queen stared at him for a long moment, her mind racing. This human spoke to her as an equal, respected her achievements without fawning over them, and showed genuine interest in her culture without any apparent ulterior motive. When had anyone last treated her like this? The formal diplomatic session that followed was unlike anything Queen Ziraleth had experienced in centuries. Where other ambassadors brought carefully rehearsed speeches and obvious attempts at manipulation, Marcus approached each topic with genuine curiosity and refreshing directness. "We're particularly interested in your atmospheric processing technology," Marcus explained, reviewing his notes. "Earth has several colony worlds that could benefit from those techniques. In exchange, we have some agricultural innovations that might help with food production on your industrial worlds." The queen found herself leaning forward in her throne, actually engaged in the conversation. "Your species has only been spacefaring for a few decades. What could you possibly offer that we haven't already developed?" "Well," Marcus said with a slight grin, "sometimes a fresh perspective is worth more than centuries of experience. We've had to be creative with limited resources. For instance, our soil regeneration techniques can restore depleted farmland in a tenth the time your current methods require." "Impossible," declared General Throck, the Queen's military advisor. "Our agricultural scientists have been working on soil restoration for generations." "I'd be happy to demonstrate," Marcus offered. "We brought samples and portable testing equipment. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones." The Queen watched the exchange with growing fascination. When challenged, Marcus didn't become defensive or angry. He simply offered proof. It was such a practical response that she found it oddly refreshing. As the formal session concluded, Marcus did something unprecedented. "Your Majesty, would you be willing to give me a personal tour of your palace? I'm particularly interested in the engineering behind those crystal spires we saw during landing." Every advisor in the room tensed. No one requested personal time with the Queen. It simply wasn't done. They waited for her legendary temper to explode. Instead, Queen Ziraleth found herself saying, "Very well. General Throck, continue the technical discussions with Ambassador Chenzaid, the human, and I will inspect the palace architecture." As they walked through corridors lined with the treasures of conquered worlds, Marcus asked thoughtful questions about construction techniques, material properties, and design philosophy. The Queen realized she was actually enjoying herself for the first time in decades. "This support beam configuration," Marcus observed, running his hand along a crystal formation, "it's brilliant. You've managed to distribute the weight load in a way that makes the entire structure stronger while using less material. The mathematics behind this must be incredibly complex." "You understand structural engineering?" the Queen asked, surprised. "I studied it before going into diplomacy," Marcus replied. "I find that understanding how things work helps in negotiations. Speaking of which, these battle murals tell an interesting story. This one appears to show the Battle of Kepler Station, but the tactical formation depicted is different from the official historical accounts." The Queen stopped walking. The mural in question showed one of her greatest military victories, but Marcus was right. The official histories had been altered for political reasons, making the victory seem easier than it actually was. The true tactical brilliance of her strategy had been downplayed to avoid embarrassing the Allied forces who had initially doubted her plan. "You notice details that most miss," she said carefully. "It's just that the formation shown here is much more sophisticated than the textbook version," Marcus explained. "Whoever commanded this battle was thinking several moves ahead. They turned what should have been a devastating defeat into a complete rout of the enemy. It's actually quite beautiful from a strategic standpoint. For the first time in over a century, Someone had recognized her true capabilities without being told. The queen felt something stir in her chest that she had long thought dead. "The commander was me," she said quietly. Marcus turned to look at her with undisguised admiration. "I thought it might be. The level of tactical innovation required. It's the mark of a truly exceptional mind." They continued walking, but the atmosphere between them had subtly shifted. The queen found herself sharing details about her engineering projects, her military campaigns, and her efforts to modernize the empire's infrastructure. Marcus listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions and offering thoughtful observations. When they reached the palace's highest spire, Marcus stepped out onto the observation platform and gasped. The view encompassed the entire capital city, with its gleaming towers and efficient transport networks stretching to the horizon. "This is incredible," he breathed. "You build all of this?" "Over the course of 2 centuries," the queen replied, joining him at the railing. "It wasn't easy. Every improvement faced resistance from traditionalists who preferred the old ways." "Change is always difficult," Marcus agreed. "But this is remarkable. You've created something that's both beautiful and functional. The city flows like a living organism." The queen studied his profile as he gazed out over her greatest achievement. There was no flattery in his voice, no calculated compliment designed to curry favor. He simply appreciated what she had built. "Why did you really come here?" she asked suddenly. Marcus turned to meet her gaze. "Honestly, we need allies. Earth is new to galactic politics, and we're trying to figure out where we fit. But beyond that, I was curious about you personally." "About me?" The queen's voice carried a note of wariness. "The briefings painted you as some kind of monster," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Unstable, violent, impossible to deal with. But that didn't match up with the evidence of your accomplishments. Someone who built a stable multi-world empire and maintained peace for centuries isn't a mindless brute. I wanted to see for myself what you were really like." "And what have you concluded?" the queen asked, her heart racing though she couldn't understand why. Marcus was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I think you're extraordinary. I think you've been surrounded by people who are either too afraid of your power to see your intelligence or too intimidated by your strength to appreciate your vision. And I think you must be incredibly lonely." The queen's carefully maintained composure cracked at Marcus's words. No one had ever spoken to her with such directness about her isolation. She turned away from him, gripping the railing with enough force to leave claw marks in the metal. "You presume too much, human," she said, though her voice lacked its usual commanding edge. "Doi?" Marcus asked gently, because from where I stand, I see someone who has achieved everything she set out to accomplish, but has no one to share it with. Someone who has been so busy being strong for everyone else that she's forgotten what it feels like to just be herself. The queen's scales rippled with emotion, shifting from deep red to a softer gold. "You know nothing about my life." "Then, tell me," Marcus said simply. "Help me understand." For a moment, the queen stood silent, warring with herself. Then, slowly, the words began to pour out. "Do you know what it's like to be born into greatness? To have every move scrutinized, every decision questioned? I was crowned at 25 after my father's death in battle. The empire was fracturing. 3 provinces were in open revolt, and the military was split between 5 different factions." Marcus listened without interruption as she continued. "I had to be harder than diamond, more ruthless than vacuum itself. Every show of mercy was seen as weakness. Every moment of doubt could have cost millions of lives. I forged this empire through will and fire, and I've spent every day since then proving I deserve to rule it." "That sounds exhausting," Marcus observed quietly. "It is," the queen admitted, surprising herself with the confession. "But the moment I show any vulnerability, there are a dozen ambitious nobles ready to challenge my authority. The moment I appear weak, our enemies will see opportunity." "When was the last time you just relaxed?" Marcus asked. The queen actually laughed, though it was bitter. "Relaxed? What does that even mean? I sleep 4 hours a night and spend the rest of my time managing an empire that spans 12-star systems. I review military reports over breakfast and approve infrastructure projects during dinner. Relaxation is a luxury I cannot afford." "Everyone needs downtime," Marcus said firmly. "Even queens." especially queens. Easy for you to say, the queen replied, though without real anger. Your species doesn't have the entire galaxy watching for signs of weakness. Actually, we do, Marcus said with a wry smile. Earth is the newest member of galactic civilization. Every other species is waiting to see if we'll prove ourselves worthy or wash out like the last 3 species that try to join. The pressure is pretty intense. The queen turned to study him. Then, how do you manage it? I remember that I'm human first, ambassador second, Marcus said. I have hobbies, friends, people I care about who know nothing about politics or diplomacy. I read books that have nothing to do with my job. I cook terrible meals and watch old movies and argue with my brother about sports. Those things keep me grounded. I have no hobbies, the queen said slowly. No friends who aren't also advisors or subordinates. No family left alive. That's not living, Marcus said gently. That's just surviving. The queen felt something crack inside her chest. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. You could learn, Marcus suggested. You're obviously intelligent enough. Before the queen could respond, her communication device chimed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, and her expression darkened. What is it? Marcus asked, noticing the change. The hegemony is massing forces near our border, the queen said, her voice returning to its command tone. They think our recent diplomatic failures have weakened our position. Marcus frowned. Diplomatic failures? My inability to secure a political marriage, the queen explained bitterly. In galactic politics, a ruler without strong alliances through marriage is seen as vulnerable. The fact that 57 suitors have rejected me has been interpreted as a sign that the Draconis Empire is declining. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Marcus said bluntly. Your worth isn't determined by whether some pampered prince has the courage to appreciate you. The queen stared at him. In galactic politics, personal strength means nothing without political alliances. Then, galactic politics is broken, Marcus replied. But if it's military alliance you need, Earth would be honored to stand with the Draconis Empire. You barely have a space fleet, the queen pointed out. We have other strengths, Marcus said confidently. Besides, sometimes the best alliances aren't between the strongest powers. Sometimes they're between people who understand each other. The queen's communication device chimed again. This time, it was Chancellor Vex requesting her immediate presence in the war room. The crisis was escalating. I have to go, she said reluctantly. Of course, Marcus replied. But, Your Majesty, this conversation isn't over. As they made their way back through the palace, the queen found her mind split between the military crisis and the extraordinary human walking beside her. When they reached the war room, she paused at the entrance. Ambassador Chun, she said formally, aware that others might overhear. I would like you to observe our crisis response procedures. As a potential ally, you should understand our military capabilities. It was a transparent excuse to keep him near her, but Marcus simply nodded. I would be honored, Your Majesty. Inside the war room, holographic displays showed the hegemony fleet movements. General Throck was coordinating defensive positions, while Admiral Kess prepared the royal fleet for deployment. They're testing us, the queen said, studying the formations. Prince Zarnok's rejection was the signal they were waiting for. They want to see if we'll respond with force or attempt diplomacy. What do you normally do in this situation? Marcus asked quietly. Overwhelming force, the queen replied. We deploy twice the ships they have, and make it clear that any aggression will be met with devastating retaliation. Has that strategy been working lately? Marcus asked. The queen paused. What do you mean? Well, if this keeps happening, maybe the strategy isn't as effective as it used to be, Marcus suggested. Sometimes the unexpected response is more powerful than the expected one. The queen looked at him sharply. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe there's a third option you haven't considered, Marcus replied with a slight smile. One that doesn't require you to prove anything to anyone. Marcus stepped closer to the holographic display, his diplomatic mind already working through possibilities. What if instead of responding with force or traditional diplomacy, you did something completely unexpected, such as, the queen asked, though she found herself genuinely curious about his perspective. Invite them to a festival, Marcus said simply. The war room fell silent. General Throck looked like he might faint, and Admiral Kess made a choking sound. Even Chancellor Vex's tentacles stopped their nervous twitching. A festival, the queen repeated slowly. Think about it. Marcus continued, warming to his theme. They're expecting you to either attack or negotiate from a position they perceive as weakness. Instead, you invite their entire fleet to witness the strength and prosperity of the Draconis Empire firsthand. Show them what they'd be fighting against, but do it through celebration rather than intimidation. That's... General Throck began, then stopped, clearly a loss for words. Brilliant, the queen finished, her eyes lighting up with understanding. They can't attack during a festival without looking like monsters to the entire galaxy. And if they attend, they'll see our technological superiority, our economic strength, and our cultural richness without feeling threatened. Plus, Marcus added with a grin, nothing says we're not worried about you quite like throwing a party when someone's trying to intimidate you. The queen began to pace, her mind racing through the implications. We could showcase our latest ship designs as part of the celebration. Display our industrial capabilities as festival decorations. The whole thing would be broadcast across the galaxy. And, Marcus said quietly, it would show everyone that the Draconis Queen is confident enough in her power that she doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. The queen stopped pacing and looked at him directly. There was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't just talking about military strategy anymore. Admiral Kess, begin preparations for the Festival of Starlight, the queen commanded. Full cultural celebration, open invitation to all galactic powers. Make it the most spectacular event in our history. Your Majesty, General Throck interjected nervously. This is highly irregular. What if they interpret it as weakness? Then, they'll learn otherwise when they see our capabilities up close, the queen replied confidently. Sometimes the strongest response is the one no one expects. As her staff rushed to implement the new plan, the queen found herself alone with Marcus in the now empty war room. That was inspired, she said. Where did you learn to think like that? Human history is full of unconventional solutions, Marcus replied. Sometimes the best way to win is to change the rules of the game entirely. The queen studied him for a long moment. You realize what you've done, don't you? You just helped me solve a problem that my best military minds couldn't crack. We solved it together, Marcus corrected. You understood the implications immediately and made it work. No one has ever. The queen began, then stopped, looking suddenly vulnerable. No one has ever offered to help me think through a problem before. They either tell me what I want to hear or wait for me to decide, so they can carry out orders. That sounds lonely, Marcus said gently. It is, the queen admitted. But today, I felt like I had a partner. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither of them had expected. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he realized what she was saying. Your Majesty, he began. Ziraleth, she said quietly. When we're alone, call me Ziraleth. Ziraleth, Marcus repeated, testing the name. I need to tell you something. This whole diplomatic mission, yes, we needed allies, but I specifically requested this assignment. Why? She asked, though she thought she might know the answer. Because every briefing file painted you as this terrifying, unstable monster, Marcus said. But the evidence didn't support that. Your empire is too stable, your infrastructure too sophisticated, your people too loyal. I wanted to meet the real person behind the reputation. And what did you find? Ziraleth asked, stepping closer to him. I found someone extraordinary who's been pretending to be invulnerable for so long that she's forgotten she doesn't have to be, Marcus said. I found someone brilliant and strong and beautiful who deserves to have someone see all of that and appreciate it. Beautiful, Ziraleth repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm a 9-foot-tall dragon with claws and scales and a temper that's legendary across the galaxy. You're magnificent, Marcus said simply, and anyone who can't see that is an idiot. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then, slowly, Marcus reached up and touched her face. Ziraleth leaned into the contact, closing her eyes at the gentle warmth of human skin against her scales. This is impossible, she murmured. We're from different species, different worlds. I'm a queen, and you're a diplomatic attaché. The best things usually are impossible, Marcus replied. But that doesn't make them any less real. When Ziraleth opened her eyes, there was something new in them. Not the controlled authority of a queen or the fierce determination of a warrior, but simply the warmth of someone who had finally found what she'd been searching for. The festival, she said. Stay for the festival. As my personal guest. I'd be honored, Marcus replied. Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible dancer. Ziraletha's laugh was pure joy, transforming her entire face. I'll teach you. It's about time someone taught me something new, too. 3 days later, the Festival of Starlight was broadcast across the galaxy. Beings from a dozen worlds watched in amazement as the Draconis Queen, resplendent in ceremonial armor, danced with a human ambassador under the light of artificial stars. The hegemony fleet had quietly withdrawn rather than interrupt what was clearly a celebration of alliance and strength. But, more importantly, Queen Ziraleth had finally found someone who wasn't afraid of her power, who appreciated her mind as much as her strength, and who had shown her that even queens deserve to be happy. And Marcus had learned that sometimes the most terrifying legends hide the most extraordinary people, waiting for someone brave enough to look past the surface and see the truth beneath. In the years that followed, their partnership would reshape galactic politics, but that night, they were simply two beings who had found something neither had expected, someone who understood them completely.